Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and this is this week's issue of the Libertarian Angle, the weekly show here on the internet that brings you the Libertarian Angle on what's going on in the world, the pure, uncompromising Libertarian Angle. And I'm joined as I am every week by my co-host in this endeavor, Richard Ebeling, who teaches economics at the Citadel. Richard, good to see you again for another round of Libertarian Angle.
Good to see you and our viewers and listeners who are kindly joining us for a little bit of their day.
Yeah, big issue in the news, Richard. America's about to be invaded again. I mean, people are going crazy. Donald Trump is just going ballistic over the new invasion of America. And of course, what they're referring to is this new caravan of penniless immigrants from Central America, who are thousands of them that are making their way up through Mexico and desiring to come to the United States to get jobs and better their lives, but they're calling it an invasion. And people, I mean, there's people, conservatives, that are absolutely terrified of this. You know, they don't know what to do. And, you know, I mean, aren't the troops still down there from the last caravan when Trump, you know, sent the National Guard down because he said, man, this invading force is coming to get us? I mean, you know, this is a very fearful nation. These refugees are coming in with women and children and penniless, and not one of them's got one gun on him. But they call this an invasion. Now, let me make clear about what an invasion is. An invasion is what the U.S. government did to Iraq. I mean, that's an invasion. When military troops come into a country and start killing people and torturing people and Abu Ghraibing people and bombing people, destroying homes and villages and hamlets and torturing people and snuffing out people's lives and leaving them disabled and maimed. That's an invasion. When refugees are coming to a country because they're starving to death in their country, or because they risk losing their lives in their country due to the violence, much of which is brought on by the U.S. government's drug war, that is not an invasion. That's people that are trying to seek a way to sustain their lives, the lives of their children, their families. They're doing anything they can to save their own lives and the lives of their families. That's a totally different thing from an invasion. What do you think, Richard?
Well, listen, you know, the invasion of Iraq, that was just an extended vacation leave for rest and R&R for military personnel of the United States. I'm shocked that you would use all of those rhetorical phrases. But the fact is, you are right to make the dichotomy. We usually think historically and politically as of an invasion as one country militarily attacking and entering another with the purpose of political subjugation, economic plundering, subservience of the people of that country and the government of that other country. Immigration is merely the arrival of people from one area on a geographical map defined as country A and moving to country B. Why are they making this move? Well, the fact is that we have immigration going on every day in the tens of millions around the globe. And what is this called? It's called international travel. I recently was in the Canary Islands, a Spanish territory in the Atlantic off the coast of Morocco. Was I an invader? No, I was going there to attend a conference. I could have stayed there longer. I could have stayed there shorter. I could have gone to other countries. And many people come to the United States to vacation, to be a tourist, to work, to retire, to invest. All of these are people freely choosing where they would like to live, work, and peaceful and honest self-improvement and the improvement of their families. Now, Trump has this perverse view, which unfortunately has often been an attitude among many people and not just in the United States, that the arrival of others from other nation states is somehow seen to be harmful, detrimental, undesirable. But the fact is is that, and a theme that we've talked about before, Jacob, America is a unique country. And it's a unique country because while it often seems like a cliche and it's sometimes poo-pooed today, we are an immense country of many different peoples in the form of a melting pot. Whether they come from different European countries or different Asian countries or Central American countries or Africa or Australia and New Zealand, it doesn't matter. Our country has no single ethnicity, it has no single religion, it has no single race. Though admittedly, of course, English is the dominant language that most of us converse in and communicate through. But the fact is we are a diverse country, and this has come through over 200, in fact, almost 300. Well, if you want to go back to the settlements in Virginia first in around 1620, more than 300 years now of a nation of people coming from other parts of the world, at first specifically parts of Europe, but then extending to the rest, and making their new lives here, escaping from economic lack of opportunity, religious discrimination, political oppression, and finding their niche in this new society. And look at this and think about the history of the country, what motivated our ancestors to come to the United States. Were they not escaping from the same hardships and problems that these, according to the newspaper counts, approximately 5,000 people are? And then as far as an invasion, certainly threatening America, the United States has now close to 230 million people, I believe. And if that is approximately the count, work out the percentage fraction of 5,000. We're talking about a minuscule amount of people. And what will they do? If they can successfully get into the United States, either legally or illegally, that is without the government's immigration rule procedures, they will then be dispersed. So then 5,000 people spread all over the United States, or even if modestly certain area, 30 million, that statistically, that's even less than the miscellaneous column. But why are these people coming? It's because, of all accounts, the lack of economic opportunities, gang and cartel violence in certain Latin American or Central American countries are leading them here. And all they want is to try to make a better life for themselves and their children. The reasons for opposition to them is another matter, and it's varied and diverse. Some are arguments that could be reasoned with. Others have more darker elements to them of a prejudicial and biased nature based upon race or ethnicity and so on. But the fact is, if one calmly and deliberatively looks at this, the history of the country, the reasons why these people are coming, no different than many of our ancestors, and 5,000 out of and 30 million. I meant to look at some statistics before we did the show today, Jacob, and I apologize that I didn't have the time. How many people are born in the United States every day? I got to imagine it's more than 5,000. Tragically, how many people die from automobile accidents or other accidents around the house each day? I wouldn't be surprised if it's more than 5,000. How many people are legally coming to the United States every day? That is according to the government's immigration rules. It's got to come to several thousand per day. So when you look upon it in that way, 5,000 people is no different than the 5,000 of all these other categories, either happy or tragic ones, that are going all the time. And so therefore this is being blown totally out of proportion merely to serve political motives. Some who are on the left, some are on the right, some are conservatives, some are Democrats. But is political to serve campaign purposes that have nothing to do with the idea of an actual individual human being and their family members merely wishing to peacefully cross a river and search for a better life.
Yeah. It's important to emphasize the moral aspect of this. I mean, that these are people that's just trying to sustain their lives, and they're really exercising what Thomas Jefferson called fundamental God-given natural rights. The rights of economic liberty, of liberty of contract, freedom of movement, the pursuit of happiness. These are rights that adhere to all people, not just Americans. But there's also the economic aspect of this. I mean, the fact is that there is more prosperity here in the United States than there is in most other countries around the world. And so you have this logical law of supply and demand, that things are miserable, on the verge of death practically in Central America, and they see these enormously high wages from American employers who are more than eager to employ them. So this is just supply and demand. They say, hey, I got a chance to make some money up there. I can make some money for my family, and they don't even have to become citizens. There's no requirement of that. There's 1 million Americans retired in Mexico, and many of them are not assimilating. They're not learning Spanish. They're just living in Mexico, hanging out with themselves, eating hamburgers instead of tacos, and nobody's requiring that they give up their American citizenship. So there's no reason why somebody that comes to this country to work and improve his life has to become an American citizen. So you've got this basic law of supply and demand that a free market would harmonize. That as wages go up because farmers here in America need people to pick the crops, the wage rate goes up, and people say, and Honduras says, man, I'm going up there. I'm going to make some quick money here. But the system of immigration controls, as we've talked about so many times, is a socialist system. It's a central planning system. The bureaucrat has what Hayek called the fatal conceit, where he can plan these complex movements of people. He can allocate quotas to Honduras and to Mexico. Well, the free market doesn't work that way. The labor is needed now, and the bureaucrat says, well, get in line, get in line. Well, the line takes 7 or 8 years to get permission. The crop is in the fields today. That's the beauty of the spontaneous order of Hayek said. The market responds immediately. And so you have this massive distortion from this immigration central planning that creates shortages in labor, and then you need a police state to enforce it. And this is what advocates of immigration controls always fail to recognize, is that in order to have the system, you have to implement an immigration police state. So it's no coincidence that in the American Southwest, you have fixed highway checkpoints, just like in communist countries. This is on east-west highways, where people have never even entered Mexico, have to be subjected not only to a search of their vehicle, but to a potential full-body search with body cavities where they take off all your clothes. And then they've got warrantless searches of farms and ranches within 100 miles of the border, not just near the border. The Border Patrol claims jurisdiction within 100 miles of every American border. Well, that's about 2/3 of the population. So now you've got Border Patrol boarding Greyhound buses to check for people's papers. And if they're dark-skinned or they look a little strange and they don't have their papers with them, they're taken into custody and arrested. And you've got roving Border Patrol checkpoints where the Border Patrol just stops a car for no reason at all. They call it a reasonable suspicion, and they search them right there on the highway. You've got these separation of children from their parents. You've got raids on private businesses. Imagine military thuggish raids would look like SWAT teams moving into private businesses that have willingly hired illegal immigrants because they're such hard workers. This is the immigration police state that comes into existence. And I've seen it, Richard. I grew up on the border. I grew up on the Rio Grande in a farm there, and I've seen this police state firsthand. I've seen this ongoing, never-ending immigration crisis, and the crisis is always rooted in immigration controls. So anybody that thinks that there's some kind of plan out there, send the troops down, send the National Guard down, enact comprehensive immigration reform, that somehow is going to resolve this, it's not going to resolve it. They've had this immigration crisis for decades, and that crisis is rooted in socialism. There's only one thing that works to resolve this crisis, and that's freedom. Freedom and free markets. Freedom and free markets, which necessarily means free trade and open immigration, open the borders, means that all of a sudden people are now free to cross back and forth, just like people are free from Maryland and Virginia to cross back and forth across the Potomac River. That's what harmonizes people's interests. That's what brings peace and friendship and vitality to an area. But as long as you have this socialism in this police state, you're going to just keep having this Trump-like nonsense, this conservative-like nonsense. Well, Democrat too, liberals, they support immigration controls too. That as long as you have this system, you're going to have massive distortions. You're going to have death, suffering, misery, and a lot of hypocrisy thrown into the mix.
Well, you raised an issue that now has me having a new concern. You had said that Americans live in Mexico may not be eating tacos, and Mexicans residing in the United States may not be eating double whoppers with cheese. What if we are facing a balance of burger deficit? That more Americans in Mexico are eating tacos than Mexicans residing in the United States are eating burgers. There seems to be a burger taco imbalance here.
I'm going to start pacing the floors.
That may require serious government intervention. We need to have a bureau of taco burger statistics to determine the exact precision of production and consumption of these two goods among our respective citizens in these different countries. This may require a wall of some sort. I don't know.
Yeah, but you've got me pacing the floors now, Richard.
Exactly. But so seriously, what is a disturbing element, as you enumerated, the that results from immigration laws, the wanton abuse and legal abuse of government and especially federal agents to enter places of business, to break into people's apartments, to arrest them as declared illegal migrants, to imprison them or hold them in jail for prolonged periods of time. The surveillance and status checks, as you were pointing out, sometimes hundreds of miles away from the border. What is perhaps most disturbing about this, Jacob, is not the embarrassment, the abuse, the humiliation, and the harm that this does to those subject to these acts, but seemingly the disregard and the lack of interest or care on the part of the American population. Because too can be affected by this. An address that's gone to, the way that you look or act and being pulled aside, as you were saying, merely because it doesn't affect you personally does not mean it could not, and that it will not affect someone who's a relative of yours, a friend, a neighbor. This seeming nonchalant disregard of a policing activity that not only threatens but every day abuses and violates some persons or families' rights to privacy, to their property, to their person, is as disturbing. This cultural indifference, if you will, as against the particular individuals who are subjected to them.
Yeah, we're getting some bad reception. Some of your statements are being blacked out. I'm getting a message that we got a poor network connection. So let me apologize to our viewers and listeners for that. We'll try to figure out the problem. But most of what you're saying is coming through. Richard, what's really bizarre is that we see this phenomenon of open borders here domestically. I mean, every day people cross state borders and county borders back and forth, and nobody hardly gives it another thought. You raised a funny point about the imbalance of trade on burgers and tacos. Well, I mean, how many people worry about the balance of trade between Virginia and Florida? I mean, I'm willing to bet that
I do
that Virginians spend more money in Florida than vice versa because of Disney World. But who knows? I mean, people do come up here to visit the memorials and so forth, Arlington National Cemetery. But it's like nobody cares what the balance of trade is between the two states. And that's the way it would be with international borders being open. After a very quick period of time, nobody would care anymore. People would be coming into the airports and they'd be getting their luggage and moving out and becoming tourists or investing somewhere or trying to see where they should put some money or maybe open a business. But nobody would care to say, excuse me, what is your citizenship? Because nobody does that today. When you walk into any place today, you may see a person that talks with a foreign accent, but you never say, can I see your papers? Because I want to know whether you're an American citizen or not. It's like nobody cares. And that's what would happen with open borders. There would be this free movements of people back and forth, and no one would care as to who's a citizen. Now, is liberty dangerous? Oh, there's no question about it. I mean, people say the whole world could come here. Is that possible? Theoretically, yeah. But I mean, could the whole state of Alabama move to California suddenly? Should we have immigration controls there because of that possibility? You can't deny that's a possibility because, you know, California is obviously a much nicer place to live than Alabama, and there's a lot more welfare in California. So maybe everybody from Alabama is going to suddenly move to California. Well, it's ridiculous. Because the market adjusts these things. As more people move into California, prices start going up, the prices of housing, the prices of everything. People start moving out. And they start moving to Texas where things are a little bit cheaper. Well, that's the way the international market works too. If things get too expensive in the United States, people tend to stay away. You see it in vacation spots. You know, if New York hotel rooms are going for $400 a night, people say, hey, maybe we ought to go to Disney World instead, where it's a little bit cheaper. So this is the great regulatory mechanism of the market. You don't have to worry about, oh, the whole world's going to come here. This may shock a lot of people, but most people like it where they live. I mean, they're accustomed to the language, they're accustomed to the culture. It's really the rare kind of person that says, I'm going to uproot myself. I'm going to leave this culture, the language, my family, my friends, and I'm going to move to this foreign country where people abuse me and insult me and trash me and humiliate me because it's worth it to me to make some extra money and get a better life for myself. That's a rare breed, and it's actually a gift to a society. I mean, people ought to be relishing the idea that these kind of people that are willing to lose everything will come to America, and because they end up bringing this strong work ethic, they bring vitality, they're bringing new businesses. This is the type of thing a society should be very grateful for. So we have this heritage of open borders. There was open immigration here in the United States for the first 100 years. It was a major factor contributing to the economic vitality and prosperity of the American people. And then the progressives come in and they bring in their socialist ideas, not only on Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and the whole welfare state, but they also bring in the national security state, and they bring in this concept of immigration controls, which is, like I said earlier, just socialist central planning that is associated with police state measures that are found in places like Cuba, North Korea, Pakistan, Egypt, and elsewhere.
Yeah, let's do a little mental experiment. Suppose that in the 1840s, when the United States fought its war with Mexico, it had not annexed the northern third of Mexico, but as some American Manifest Destiny advocates actually annexed to the United States. And let's go even further. There were some Americans who said America's goal was to unify all of Central America with the United States, including Cuba. Let's suppose that this had occurred in the 1840s and 1850s, that we had invaded, in the real sense, and annexed Mexico, Honduras, Nicaragua, Guatemala, El Salvador, and so on, and Cuba. And now these were states within the United States of America. Would we be concerned that people who lived in the United State of Honduras was choosing to live, work, or retire in the United State of Nevada or Wyoming, or that the United State of Michigan was choosing to live in the United State of Guatemala, being all part of one country, the United States? would we be concerned with the population flows, as you were suggesting, between Alabama and California? Would we be concerned where goods and services were being produced or sold between these wider and larger group of United States of America? The fact is no. It is this artificiality of a political line on a map of the world that creates this illusionary attitudes and beliefs and fallacies that somehow if this person crosses this line, either to work or to live or to sell a product or to provide a service or to search a better life, that somehow this is going to be detrimental and harmful in the receiving country. When, as you were saying, it is no difference than people in Florida or Michigan or Wyoming or Maine or Oregon. The fact is that it's just people moving where either preference or likes or market incentives of wages, work conditions, profit opportunities for business and investment seem to be suggesting to be better. And the market adapts and adjusts, as you were correctly pointing out, between shifts in prices and wages and production areas to assure that there's no such thing as all of Alabama moving to California. The fact is the market brings about harmony in these areas of population flows as in all others as with goods and services, when left free and open and left to the free choices of the individual human beings interacting with each other in the marketplace of specialization and division of labor in response to prices and profits. So this is all actually a delusional sort of political tribalism that has a basis either logically or historically, and really just plays into the purposes and attempts of political demagoguery on those who have access to grind for their own purposes and benefits.
Yeah, that's a great mental experiment that you brought up with respect to the United States of Honduras and Costa Rica and so forth. In fact, Richard, it's kind of ironic, that the advocates of immigration controls are so concerned about these Mexicans that want to come up here and get jobs and improve their living standards, and yet here, look at the mindset of the American people in the 19th century. I would never countenance the forcible stealing of the northern third of a country like Mexico, but that's what they effectively did with President Polk provoking the Mexicans into attacking down there in Brownsville in order to provoke a war with the objective of stealing the northern third of the country. Now, here they're knowingly absorbing the entire the northern third of Mexico, along with all the people there. Every one of them was Mexican. All the culture that was there, the laws, the language. Everybody spoke only Spanish. And so here they're eagerly, while Americans today, supporters of immigration controls, are concerned about a few thousand immigrants coming from Mexico, here in the 19th century Americans said, we want to absorb the entire northern third of Mexico, along with all the culture and so forth. And so, is it any really big surprise that even 150 years later or so, that Mexicans still have this natural affinity for that part of the world that was once their country? If you look at my hometown of Laredo, there's street names named after Mexican heroes, like the main street in town is Iturbide, which was a big Spanish general figure in Mexican history, and there's Madame Morris, and you see this all around. El Paso is not called the Pass. San Francisco is not called St. Francis. Los Angeles is not called the Angels. I mean, you have all this culture that is still part of the absorption of that country. And so I do find it kind of ironic that people today say, why do those Mexicans still want to come over to what was their part of the world? They should have recognized that once we stole it fair and square, they should just stay out. And keep in mind, of course, that we not only stole the country, we absorbed every single Mexican citizen that was living there and immediately converted them into American citizens.
Absolutely. This maybe some of the viewers and listeners will remember an act of Thomas Jefferson when he was president, the Louisiana Purchase. The central part of what today is called the United States, including Louisiana, it was French territory. There was French-speaking people, French culture, French social life in New Orleans, for instance. St. Louis, it was named after a French figure. All of these were parts of the French culture, which we intentionally absorbed with a purchase from Napoleon. And we suddenly had these additional people of different language and cultures, backgrounds, and interests. By golly, now Americans feel they speak French. And you can't trust them because they don't pronounce all the letters in their words. They must be doing something sneaky down there speaking that French. Did it bother us? No. It was considered part of manifest destiny. And in fact, that's why I used that earlier mental experiment. Suppose we had annexed all of Mexico and all or most of the Central American countries. They would then be part of our country. It is hard to believe that Spanish would have been extinguished as either a primary language in that part of the United States or a leading secondary language, which most Americans, including English-speaking ones, came to learn. Just like in Switzerland, it is the exception to find any Swiss who may have been born in the German language part of Switzerland. And the result is that Americans today, they just don't learn English, they just speak Spanish. Well, if we'd absorbed that much of a Spanish-speaking part of North America, we would be a bilingual country today by necessity, as the Swiss are with French and German. And would we be griping about it? Would we feel culturally threatened by it? No. It would have become the new order of things. It would not be an issue being one country and people freely moving and speaking and interacting and culturally sharing. And just what we need to learn is that while politics does leave its imprint on things, and there are differences among cultures, we come to enjoy that in the sense of different clothes, different music, different foods. But just because there's this line on a map that says this is the one nation state, as divisions that somehow make the people on each side of that line enemies or antagonists, rather than people who can cooperatively improve their lives together through the mechanisms of free markets, free trade, free enterprise, and freedom of association in general.
You know, it just occurred to me as you're talking that we may have given Democrats and Republicans, liberals and conservatives, interventionists, an idea that to eliminate the illegal alien problem from Mexico, they might now start thinking in terms of just invading the country and absorbing the entire country. And then going further and invading, you know, the rest of the countries in Central America. Therefore, you wouldn't have any more illegal aliens. They'd all be American citizens.
Absolutely. That takes care of the immigration. So, in other words, what we need is a wall, but on the Panama-Colombian border.
Okay. On that note, we got to wrap things up. We're out of time. Richard, has always enjoyed the conversation, and I look forward to talking to you next week.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you all for tuning in. Come and visit us at fff.org, and we'll see you next week.